The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to go on the mat. The Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
Welcome to On the Mat, end of the year edition. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, joined by the self-proclaimed Scrooge and Grinch combined. Had no idea you were this anti-holidays.
I'm not anti-holiday. I'm not a Grinch. I'm a Scrooge. And there's a big difference.
Why? Because you made a turnaround
Because I
at
didn't
some
try
point?
to steal Christmas from somebody. You know, I just want to see the work get done, and that's that.
But the reality...
That makes me a Scrooge.
The reality
I don't
is,
pay for it.
Doug, hear me out. Scrooge, at the end of the movie, comes to a resolution. He changes his life, so that should actually be a compliment.
Okay.
Is that you changed everything in your life to come
because
around.
Because the Grinch did, I'm supposed to, too. Huh?
Well, the Grinch did, too. Good point.
Yeah.
It's everything's about the resolution and how you end up changing in all of this. And the Scrooge and the Grinch did it. So you have to be happy with that.
Okay.
Hopefully you had a good holiday. Did you enjoy yourself?
Well, we were pretty laid back this year, you know. Just things that went on that things couldn't come together because of the weather and
Sure.
other things that were going on. So
Sure.
we just kind of kicked back and relaxed right through it.
Did your son Seth give you any news?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Well, I just thought
No.
the NCAA wrestling tournament and just the opportunity to go. Didn't know if
I
he
thought
was...
you were going to check with him.
Oh, well, I was going to, but I thought he was going to tell you if he was going to go to the NCAA tournament.
Oh.
So maybe that's something that you're not going to be able to. He can't go to. I was just hoping he would find out, and that you would find out.
Okay, I'll see what happens. I
Well,
guess.
let's find out and see.
All right.
But I'm excited about the NCAA tournament, which is an annual tradition.
Yeah, we call this the year-end show, but we're really just getting started on the real year.
Well, it is,
You know?
but we get to look back on everything that happened through the calendar year, which is a lot of fun. We do a lot of reflecting on this show, but we get a chance to do that in two segments with Jason Bryant of Matt Talk Online, and he has good experience in what we want to do here because he was at the Olympic Games. He was, of course, at the NCAA tournament and had a role in it at the Olympic trials in Iowa City. Had a role as the
New York
announcer.
City for the NCAAs was it was a highlight of my year, I think.
The entire year was the NCAAs in New York City. So a lot of people were bashing it, saying that it was too expensive. They don't want to go there again. Clearly, you're not in that camp.
I am not in that camp whatsoever.
What did you like about it?
The whole venue, I mean, sitting with the people from out east, I mean, it was good, I thought. I mean, it gave me a whole different perspective than getting moved in and by the same old fans all the time. It was a new group of people, and it was a lot of fun.
And it was something that
we didn't
you
do
take
that.
it.
You know, we did okay. Didn't cost us all that much.
No, it didn't cost us much, but it was nice because we had unprecedented access to Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And you think of all the years we went, even being in Cedar Falls, Iowa when it was here in 1997, we weren't near as close as what we had in New York City.
No, across the street.
When you think about that, it was closer than any venue we've had. And to think that in New York City we would have that opportunity, Doug, that doesn't seem possible that we were within, seriously, 100 feet, 100 yards?
Well,
a football
100
field?
yards probably.
Yeah, football field away. Yeah, just walk right across. But it was
some of the best pizza in the world is just another 100 yards after that.
Yeah. But
I thought the whole thing was fantastic.
And it was so fun to have it at that arena. I hope it goes back there. I know that there were some people that really were against going to New York City, saying they hope it never goes back, even upset about it being there in the first place. I was never one of those people. I like seeing it get spread around. And if we could just go through, if you had a wish list, Doug, of 3 venues where it hasn't been to, of course it's been to St. Louis and Omaha, but if you said, hey, 3 venues you'd like the NCAA Wrestling Tournament Division I to be, what would be on your dream list?
On my dream list for
venues.
For venues.
Yeah, for the NCAA Wrestling Tournament.
You know, I'd really like to see something on the West Coast, maybe Seattle.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think any of the Washington schools have it, but
They don't.
Oregon's got it, and some of the so maybe we need to move it down to Sacramento or something like that.
Yeah, I think a California might be a good idea. I don't think it's a
Weather
possibility.
might be a little better.
Yeah. What would you think about Vegas? You went there for the World Championship.
Yeah, I'd be up for that too. I mean, Vegas. We've been out there for the World Championships, and we were there for the American Championships.
Yeah, U.S. Open, Olympic trials.
Yeah,
both have been out there.
2008, right?
2008, I was out there. 2007 World Team Trials was there, so it's a quality venue. I think it'd be good out there. Cheap flights, you could get in there. It'd be easy access. I like that potential, but I don't know if they would ever go out to Vegas. But that would be. I don't know if that's on your dream list. But I'm just throwing out an idea for you.
You know, we've added a couple schools from California to the mix, so I think California would be a good place to do it, try it, just to see what kind of interest they generate out there.
Yeah.
Because the West Coast crowd, we haven't ever had that at any of the other venues. Maybe they won't even come, who knows?
Well,
they're pretty laid back in California. That's their trademark, but...
It goes back to a classic quote by Jim Gibbons when he said the NCAA wrestling tournament Division I could be in Nome, Alaska, and you'd sell the thing out. And I agree with that. I think the D1 wrestling championships has such prominence, such clout. It's such an important event to our sport that people will find a way to go there because it is. It's not really.
It is the top of the line as far as the American wrestling fan goes.
I agree. I think it's bigger than the Olympics for wrestling.
There's a lot of people that don't even take time to follow and figure out how the Greco and the freestyle works that well.
Yeah.
So you know we're basically indoctrinated to it from kindergarten on up through seniors in college.
Yeah.
That same style, and it's what we call wrestling.
Yeah. You're right, and it's
we don't say
the crown jewel.
That's wrestling. That's not folk style.
Yeah, it's our form of collegiate wrestling or high school wrestling, and I think it's so important to make that distinction because hey, when you talk about the high bar, what you have as far as media coverage, you're going to be on ESPN in prime time now. And we've seen the gamut. We've talked to Tim Johnson about that when he said that it played a month later at midnight on a bar in a package that was more of a highlight package. And now we have it live for a 3-hour spot on ESPN. I wish they'd do more of that
for
through
3
the
days
season.
Straight.
For 3 days straight. You get to watch every single match you want. It's unprecedented. And so why wouldn't you want, as a college wrestling fan or a college athlete, to know that you have those opportunities now? It's off the charts. It's really amazing to think about how far we've come. Even with Gable's match in 1970, that was on tape delay. You didn't get live access. You didn't get live coverage during that time, and it's only been the last 10 years that we've had that. And it's pretty special to watch the transformation. Although, if you're there, it does move on a little bit slow. There's 10-minute gaps, and a lot of times with the semifinals, it doesn't move on as quickly as it should. And I think that can be a drawback. But, hey, if it's on TV, it's the best thing possible. I think it's fantastic that we get those opportunities. As we look forward to the NCAA tournament, I know this is a reflection show, but we talk about the history of what's happened. Penn State has that opportunity to win 6 out of 7 championships coming up in March, and I think they're in a very good position to be able to do that again this year or this season. I think what Cale Sanderson's been able to do going from Iowa State to Penn State, they got a nice package out there. They got the recruits. You have Pennsylvania being really the haven of the sport right now. What Penn State's been able to do is pretty special. It's been pretty special.
It is special. I mean, coming from Utah and ended up out east like Cale did, I mean, that's just flipped his world upside down. Nobody ever grows up thinking they're going to be having that much of an impact on the sport. But when he went to Penn State, that just opened up this sport for everything, I think.
We're a different sport with him going.
Absolutely.
It's Gable-esque. It's Gable went to Iowa. That changed everything.
Yep.
Cale Sanderson went to Penn State. That changed everything. And the mark is there. You just have to look at the championship records to know that Iowa State lost 2 icons, and they went and they changed the sport in inexplicable ways. Gable, 15 of 21 seasons, still an icon in the sport, still the icon. Cale Sanderson goes to Penn State 1 year, and then they win a championship. They go 2011 through 2014. Ohio State sneaks in there in 2015, and then they win it last year. And there's no reason to think they couldn't win it this year. And what they have in the wrestling room coming up,
it's almost mind-boggling.
It is.
Thinking about
it's off the charts, the recruits they get.
That's why I have Harold Nichols on my Mount Rushmore.
All right, who is on your Mount Rushmore? I think people would like to know this. Who's on Doug Van Gelder's Mount Rushmore?
Well, I thought about it, and John Doak, who was my high school coach.
All right.
Also the first one of the predicament. He's the man that actually started the predicament, Iowa.
Yeah, sure.
And so he was first. He was a psychology teacher, and I took that to heart. He knew he could really work into your head. I knew that was an important part of the sport from him. Harold Nichols was, I think we've said enough about Iowa State, and he's the grandfather of that place.
So there's 2, John Doak, Harold Nichols. This is Doug Van Gelder's.
Chuck Patton.
Chuck Patton's on yours?
It was my college coach. And
okay.
It was a different experience, I went to Nichols. I went to Iowa State camps for Nichols, and I never went to. I don't even know if Patton had camps in like all these wrestlers seem to have now. All the coaches do, but and then probably the most unusual, and I've always got to be unusual. You know that is Vic Marcucci.
Okay.
He did the most unique thing in wrestling, and I don't ever he was the man that had to put the second place medal around Dan Gable. Mm-hmm. And that's the only man that ever did that. That took guts and courage, and he was a little eclectic. I loved him, watching him wrestle, and it was fun. So those are my 4.
He's still unique.
Yep.
Yeah, you're still going to get a unique perspective from Vic Marcucci, who was an NCAA wrestling champion for Iowa State in 1967 and lives in Waterloo. So that's the connection there for you. And as we have things to be excited about with our local programs. I think UNI has some positives, especially coming off a season where they didn't win a dual meet in the West Gym, and that's a tough place to wrestle. And
from the year before, it's just been up and down. It was a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, you had an undefeated dual meet season, and then you really struggle the following season, and not really sure why sometimes. I think the injury bug happened, and I think even in interviews, Doug Schwab has talked about his growth, and now he's had to make adjustments and make some of the changes, and I think you see some of the results of that this season, and I think you're going to continue to see that more and more down the road on where Doug Schwab continues to make improvements. But I think they made steps in the right direction. I think looking at the Virginia Tech meet, I think a lot of people were disappointed in the way they approached that meet and the effort. I think you're one of those people that articulated that. But they came back against Old Dominion and dominated and looked good in that dual meet. And you saw what the potential was with some of these guys, whether it was Josh Alber or Max Thompson or Dylan Peters in his senior season, and what they really can do this year. I'm hopeful that they can get back to that top 15 performance that they've had a couple years in a row there. And I think even looking back at the University of Iowa, what an interesting season they had. Didn't get a trophy, and I know that's not what they go for, but it's always going for the best possible place you have available. I think that's a core principle. They got 5th place. Virginia Tech got their first trophy, and when you think about the history there with Tom Brands being at Virginia Tech for a couple years, didn't end well. Those recruits from Virginia Tech came to Iowa, were not allowed to transfer without losing that season of eligibility, so Brent Metcalf had to sit on the sidelines his freshman season. So did Jay Borschel and Dan LeClaire. They all had to go through that, and then you have Kevin Dresser from Virginia Tech, who took over that role from Humboldt, Iowa. Yeah, from Humboldt, Iowa, NCAA champion there, and really went off this year on the University of Iowa and the NWCA, calling them yellow, saying that they won't duel us in. I mean, that's way back in in early March, late February that happened, and really had choice words for the NWCA and the University of Iowa. It seems like an eternity ago, but it'll be really interesting to get Jason Bryant's take on all of that, because he was the one that was part of that, conducted that interview.
Probably one of the most disturbing things that happened this year.
Yeah, and then the bowl championship type concept, and I think Brian Smith put it best. I think it was Brian Smith that talked about that hey, here we're trying to implement a bowl concept, right? And you even see it this season. A lot of the marquee players are saying we're sitting out the bowls because we want to get ready for the NFL. We don't want to injure ourselves. We don't want to hurt our chances. And NCAA Division I football, or FBS football, is getting away from that. They now have a 14 playoff. And so it just kind of shows how backwards wrestling is a little bit. Here we are jumping on board with the bowl concept, and FBS football is trying to get away gradually from that. I'd like to see us get back to all of the teams back at the Unidome. We lost a great opportunity there, and unfortunately,
that was such an outstanding event. All classes, all divisions, all sexes. It was all there. It was the greatest 2-day wrestling spectacle outside of the NCAA that you can imagine.
And in some ways, it was a spectacle that had its own niche in our sport.
Well, absolutely.
You had all of them. I still have memories there from that particular tournament. Even when
I'm still uncertain why it happened.
Well, it was because Iowa didn't show up that year, and you lost your fan base. So that was the 2011 season. They decided they did not want to participate because they had a young team that year. I think it was Tom Brands' best job of coaching, even though they didn't win it that year. They lost everyone after that 2010 season. And they came back and they got third at the NCAA wrestling tournament. They didn't feel like they were ready at that point. It was a coaching decision on Tom Brands' part. They decided not to go. And you lost a lot of the Iowa fans. Hey, Iowa fans drive this sport in a lot of ways.
Its economic viability?
Absolutely.
Okay.
When you can't get 8,000 people there and fill the stands, and that shows you the power that the Iowa fans have, and they showed again what power they have when 40,000 people show up to a dual meet outside, and it was probably more like 50,000 because they let a lot of people in right at the end of that dual meet. In 2015, the Grapple on the Gridiron. And so if we even go back a little further in how we reflect, that was a special time. And I think that marked really an important spot in our sport, is that you move forward from that. You had the NCAA tournament, you had the Big Tens at the University of Iowa, you had the Olympic trials at the University of Iowa, and then it just moved on from there into the Olympics.
Have the World Team Championship.
Well,
there.
World Cup in
World
2018.
Cup,
yeah, that's going to be a neat event that we get to have. We have to cut this off. I know that's a Scrooge move on my part, at least pre making the commitment to exactly. But we'll be back with Jason Bryant from Mat Talk Online. We'll do more of a season in review on the mat.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When all you want is sports, all you need is 1650 The Fan.
We are back on the mat, 1650 The Fan. I'm Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum. Along with Doug Van Gelder, our end-of-the-year show has 40 more minutes left in it, and we get to review for another 40 minutes with our own Jason Bryant of MatTalkOnline.com. He likes to be known as Twinkle Toes. How are you, Jason?
First of all, I do not like to be known as Twinkle Toes, and let me just say it, for at least the last time of 2016, Hail Caesar!
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's
I can hear Scott in the production room right now cracking up on that.
Yeah. Well, as you should. And there's people that actually come by at dual meets, Jason, at the ODU meet, nonetheless, that go by Doug and they give him a thumbs up or thumbs down, and they recognize his Caesar status within Blackhawk County. I don't know. You would know better than I do if it's permeated into the national wrestling spotlight, but certainly among friends, we know Doug is Caesar.
Yeah, I don't know if the toga-wearing one has quite permeated past outside the borders of the great state of Iowa, but up here in Minnesota, we're waiting for that moment to come.
We're going to get it there, and actually having a live production of Doug wearing the Caesar outfit would be just monumental going into 2017.
My wife sees it every night.
The yoga?
Huh?
Your yoga outfit? Your toga.
Yeah. Toga.
That's
Yeah,
pretty neat.
yoga. Toga. Let's not talk about Doug wearing yoga.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? Somebody's gonna have to give Fenslaw some heart palpitations.
Oh, yeah, just that thought of Doug in yoga pants. Man, thank you for that image, Jason. Thank you for that image. But
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Well, hey, we're doing a year-end review, and let's start with an interview you did with Kevin Dresser from Virginia Tech. It really caught wrestling off guard a little bit. It set the wrestling world on storm when he called out the University of Iowa for being yellow. He called the NWCA yellow. He had a lot of choice words. As we're looking back at 2016 and looking at the year that was, what did that moment mean to how our view of the sport was going into championship season?
Well, actually, Kyle, the color was orange.
It was orange?
It
Okay.
was orange, yeah. It was orange, and it was definitely something, because I talked to Coach Dresser earlier this week about the national duels and how the coaches poll is conducted. But as I'm sitting there doing the interview, and I do a number of podcasts here on the Matt Talk Podcast Network, and include this show as part of it. But when Coach Dresser, who I've known since I was in high school, just simply laid it out like that. I haven't had that many jaw-dropping moments in my career, and I've seen a lot of stuff and heard a lot of things and interviewed a lot of people, and that was a moment where I'm like, did that just happen? And did that just happen on one of my shows? And it was well, one thing, it got people talking about the national duels, which whether or not it was the desired, effect, it remains to be seen. It's in the eye of the beholder, but it definitely said, hey, guess what? Virginia Tech, you're now in that conversation when people talk about rivalries and ire, and we talk about Cornell and Lehigh, Iowa State. Well, Virginia Tech kind of forced themselves into that discussion, and they kind of backed it up with a trophy this year. So they didn't get a chance to wrestle the Hawks in Carver like they wanted, and ultimately they came out with a trophy, and Iowa didn't. So it was like one of those things where, at least for that season, the end of the 2015-16 season, Tech did get the last laugh. We're waiting to see how that moves into 2016-17. But that was definitely one of the more eye-opening moments I've had in my career, not just last year, but my career as a whole.
Was that the most memorable interview you've had?
It's up there. It's definitely up there because I know I had one recently with Don Sayanga, who's been a longtime historian for Amateur Wrestling News. It was fantastic. Matthew Modine and Frank Jasper with the Vision Quest a couple of years ago was really good. But as far as the timeliness type of thing, that was like, oh my gosh, did that just happen? Yeah, it's definitely in the top 5.
Were you rushing to get that up as quick as possible when that happened? Because it was a podcast.
Well, the issue was rushing to make sure it didn't get taken down, because that with that show's paid for by Virginia Tech, just like the show from Old Dominion is paid for by ODU and Buena Vista and down the line. So
right.
The key is making sure that when the administration comes back and says, "Hey, can you?" It's
right.
one of those. Well, it's like, well, I want to keep the episode up because I'm not big into super censorship, but you had to go through the whole, like, all right, let's keep the context, let's eliminate the words, and make sure that the episode, the value of what was said, not how it was said, but the value behind the message stayed legitimate. So there were a couple edits post after it got out there. So if you go download that show right now, it's going to sound slightly different than the first 4,000 or 5,000 people that heard it right out of the chute.
On the mat with Jason Bryant of Matt Talk Online. You can listen to a podcast of this show on his website, MattTalkOnline.com. Also suggest you get the subscription to his newsletter. It's the first thing I check every morning, so I highly recommend that you get that in your mailbox. You'll get all the breaking news, and it's actually kind of helped me because I don't really go to websites anymore. I just go direct to the source, so I appreciate that being in my mailbox every morning. We're talking about Virginia Tech and the University of Iowa and that heated exchange that happened at the end of the year. Not necessarily an exchange, but that interview. And as we talk about Virginia Tech getting that trophy, what did that do for Virginia Tech as far as just, hey, we can get to the next level and work toward a championship? Do you see the bar keep raising with that program?
Yeah, because we started to see that probably 10, 12 years ago when Missouri and Bryant Smith started to put the Tigers into the national conversation. We're like, wow, this this is Missouri. Well, they were terrible for so long, and now that they're a trophy-winning team. And, we've seen Ohio State win a national title, but with Virginia Tech getting that first trophy, you saw what that program was with, losing 34-3 to Old Dominion in a dual meet not that long ago to being fourth in the country. So what it's done is it's shown that you can win at a school outside of the Big Ten. It's shown that you can get notoriety, in this case, in a school outside the Big Ten. And it also helps to see that these other Power 5 conferences, like with the ACC, it's not just Virginia Tech in the ACC. We've seen Maryland commit to wrestling, NC State, Virginia Tech, all commit to wrestling. Pittsburgh, now that they're in the ACC. So there is a growth potential to become a winning program. It's not just going to be the top 5 teams in the Big Ten plus Oklahoma State in the Big 12 that are going to win national championships and trophies. So Virginia Tech being a good team helps wrestling because it's like, okay, well, guess what? The ACC is a player. We saw that with NC State beating Oklahoma State and Iowa on the road last year in dual meets. They've become a player, so it's expanded, I think, the reach of wrestling in terms of who can actually win. I mean, you're winning a trophy, you're in that situation where, you know what, you have a chance to win this thing.
Jason, you follow age group wrestling as close as anyone, and Spencer Lee is doing a lot of special things. 3rd age group world title in a row, and he will be going to the University of Iowa next season. I know that there's a lot of hype about him, and even people saying, hey, he's a lock. He's going to be a 4-time NCAA wrestling champion. Is he going to be big enough? Is he going to be able to fill that role and go in and do some special things right away at Iowa?
Well, one thing that helps with the world of college wrestling is we see a lot of blue chippers. They get that red shirt year. So Spencer Lee coming out as a true freshman, sure he can compete. We'll see how big he is. I mean, how much that talent is impacted by his size, because tactically and technically he's phenomenal. The question is as you bring up, is he going to be big enough? Well, I think after a redshirt year and a year of eating some of that Iowa corn-fed beef, he's going to be in good shape. So by the time he's a redshirt freshman, I think he's going to be really set to go. I have a real hard time in making predictions like 4-time national champion. I mean, let's look. How many have we had ever? And how many phenoms have we had come out and even guys win wrestling championships as a freshman? Dustin Schlater won a title as a freshman, as a true freshman. And people are like, 4-timer. Well, he only plays 3 times. Things can happen. Injuries can happen. So I'm very, very hesitant to predict anyone to be a 4-time champion, let alone, I think some people are saying undefeated 4-time champ. We've only ever had one of those. But right. Spencer Lee is phenomenal. He's got great coaching. He's got a great head on his shoulders. And I think even if you're not a Hawkeye fan, you're going to love to watch this guy compete unless you happen to be the team against him when he gets to college. So I think he's got the makings of being something special. But, again, still young, and there's a lot of wrestling left in his career.
Mark Hall suffered a loss in his redshirt season, and I know there was talk about if he was going to redshirt this year, if they were going to pull him out. As you look at where he is right now, has done some good things since that loss to Central Michigan. Do you see him staying in redshirt for the remainder of this season?
I think the scuffle is going to decide it all because he's going to go down there and see how it is. Penn State's not wrestling in there. So, and Penn State has two guys, Gino Morelli, who's been to the show, and Shakur Rashid, who's now up at a more comfortable weight class. And those two guys are definitely interchangeable in a lot of ways. Are they anywhere from 8 to 15 in the rankings with what you look at? And Cale's got to realize is hey, am I going to pull this guy off and is a 5th place out of him worth it? Can Morelli and Shakur get, anywhere from 3rd, 4th, 5th place points? I don't think they're national championship contenders, but they're All-American contenders. Is the difference in points enough to where it makes sense to pull Mark Hall's red shirt? Personally, I don't think so right now that you can make that distinction. Again, I'm not a coach. I don't have a plan as it stays for Penn State. But I think with Morelli and Rashid, they've got 2 good options right now. If they don't perform and Mark Hall goes out and wins the scuffle, the second of the brand new year, we have a different discussion. We could have this very same discussion a week, and the whole landscape could be different.
You will be at the Midlands, of course, and that's always an important tournament. The Southern Scuffle has taken a little bit of the luster away from that, but the Midlands is coming back a little bit, and you see some quality teams there. What is the Midlands going to do for a team like Iowa as far as solidifying their lineup and doing some things just to get them on track that can really make a push for them to be a national championship as a team?
I think this year Iowa's lineup is less contingent on the Midlands performance. I think I joked with either Tom or Terry that did Nathan Burak ever wrestle the Midlands attached? I mean, it was kind of a joke that he was unattached, I think, the first 3 years of his career because they were thinking, are we going to redshirt him? Are we going to redshirt him? Are we going to redshirt him? And ultimately, they never did with that particular situation. So I think the Midlands this year in terms of lineup situations is less of a challenge for Iowa. I know that Topher Carton has settled in at 141. We've still got the undisclosed injury to Corey Clark. But, you're seeing guys, Stephen Holloway is filled in acceptably at heavyweight, still probably weighing in around 220. I think Cash Wilkie has a lot of upside at 197. He hasn't really shown a whole lot of it yet. I've seen flashes of it that I like from him. But I don't think there's a whole lot of questions about Iowa's lineup. I think except for the Marinelli situation, how is he going to do at 65? Is it going to be enough to pull the trigger? We'll see. It's kind of like going back to the Mark Hall situation. Is Marinelli going to be that much of an upgrade over Joey Gunther, who's had a pretty good season so far? Granted, he hasn't wrestled anybody like super tough, but you got to look at it as okay. Is this the best we're going to get? I mean, what's the difference of 4 points or 8 points, so to speak? So. I think Iowa's going to be a heavy favorite of the Midlands, but I don't think they have those lineup questions this year like they have in years past.
We are on the mat with Jason Bryant of MattTalkOnline.com. We're doing a review of the 2016 calendar year and what happened in the sport of wrestling. And, Jason, I want to get your number one wrestling story from your perspective. What was the number one thing on your list as you look back at 2016?
Oh, man, dude, one, because there's so many different ways that we can look at this.
Well, yeah.
I think I have 1 and 1A, to be honest with you.
Okay, so let's break it down actually to college and international. Does that help you?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
let's do it that way.
I think from an American wrestling perspective, there was no bigger story and a groundbreaking achievement than what Helen Maroulis accomplished. And if you're not a fan of women's wrestling, get over it, okay? It's going to stay. It's going to be here. We have an Olympic champion. We now have a hero, a leader for the other half of our population. The girls in this country that love wrestling now have their Gable. They now have their John Smith. They now have their Jordan. But they have an icon who did something that nobody could ever do, and that was beat Saori Yoshida at the Olympics or the World Championships. What Helen did for women in wrestling in this country cannot really be put into words because she beat Superwoman, and she beat her on her turf, the Olympics, after not even sniffing a point the previous times they've wrestled. So Helen's victory, in its sense and in how it should impact wrestling, is the single biggest moment when it comes to non-college wrestling in this country this year.
Okay.
Yes, Snyder being an Olympic champ, the youngest Olympic champion on the men's side. Well, guess what? He had to unseat an Olympic champion named Henry Cejudo to take that title. Helen didn't have anybody to unseat. She was the first ever to do this from an American standpoint. And she did it by beating the most decorated wrestler, man or woman, in the sport's history. So I think Helen right there sets the bar when it comes to the story. And the problem is a guy like Ryan Lochte screwed up her moment when it came to the national media. Not just wrestling media, but the national media. So Helen, I want to give Helen her due because that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is the story we should all be talking about right now, here, and forever.
All right, so that was 1. So you have a 1A?
Well, on the college side.
Okay, college. All right.
Yeah, it's Madison Square Garden hosting the NCAA championships. Because everything that comes with the world's most famous arena. It wasn't as comfortable for a lot of people, but guess what? This was the Garden. This is the single busiest sports venue in the country. It is the hardest place to get a date. This is why the Grapple at the Garden floats, because they have, we can go here or here. To get an event at Madison Square Garden that isn't Billy Joel, which sells out every time he goes to the Garden, you got 3 days for a wrestling event that's attended really well in the Midwest, and it's typically regarded as a fringe sport in the national media. You got 3 days at the Garden, and you put more butts in the seats than most places ever have for wrestling. So regardless of the actual competition, guys like Wisdowski and Snyder with their fantastic heavyweight final, the event itself, to me, was the biggest story in college wrestling.
So going back to Helen Maroulis, I think that there might still be a disconnect. I've talked to a couple female wrestlers that have come to the museum, and they didn't even know about Helen Maroulis winning a gold medal at the Olympics. How do we solve that problem, Jason?
You know, that's the age-old question, because people like you and I, we really try to do our best. I mean, you've had Afsoon Johnson on the show. You've had Tricia Saunders on the show. We really try to tell the stories about the Trailblazers that gave people like Helen and Adeline Gray and Christy Morano, Christy Davis, all those opportunities to really okay. But the problem is the media outside of the people that care about women's wrestling, they don't care about wrestling. So the New York Times and ESPNW, they did some good stuff on women's wrestling. But you know what? It wasn't on ESPN as much as it was on their Instagram account. Okay, great. The fact is, we as a sport need to be more accepting to saying that Helen Maroulis is the best wrestling story of the year. It's not just my opinion. I think factually that kind of there's enough factual standpoint to back that up on just if this was a male that did this, if this was an American male that beat if it was basically it's another Carell Rulon.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Think of Gardner.
How much did Rulon? He was on the freaking Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean. Oh, but you know what? Women's wrestling, it's not as deep right now.
Right.
But it's growing. It's in its fourth cycle. It's about time that, again, I think people, I'm not saying it's a misogynistic type of thing, but some people, even in our own community, we say, oh, it's just like JV wrestling. Well, get over yourself.
Yep.
It's here. I got 2 daughters, man.
We have to take our first break. We'll be back with more Season in Review with Jason Bryant next on The Mat.
Log on and listen online at 1650thefan.com, the online home of 1650 The Fan.
We are back on The Mat, 1650 The Fan. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, along with Doug Van Gelder. We are recapping 2016, the year that was in wrestling, with Jason Bryant of MatTalkOnline.com. Jason, let's do something fun here. We're just going to throw out a few categories, and Doug could chime in, too, about just what we thought of the year and give our kind of end-of-the-year awards to a few people. Jason, most exciting wrestler of the year?
Most exciting wrestler of the year. Oh, man. Okay, international or college?
Oh, let's give both, because I have one that I'm going to give most exciting to for college, and then I'll probably go international. So I'll give you one of each.
International, I'm going to go with Kyle Snyder just because of the way he closed matches late. He's down against the Georgian in the Olympics 4-0, and then just breaks him, 9 straight points. He just 10 straight points, breaks him. So that's being able to come from behind and score and win in that type of fashion made Snyder not the flashiest, but definitely the most exciting, because it was one of those things where there was build up there, like, okay, when's it going to happen? There it is, nailed it. So internationally, his style of wrestling was definitely the most exciting for me to watch.
Okay, how about college?
College, there were a lot of candidates last year. I always like watching Thomas Gilman. I always think he's exciting to watch. I always like watching Joey Dance. He didn't have the tournament that he wanted to have last year, but I think Alex Dieringer, just because he can put up points, he's not a guy that's going to slow it down and stall. I think that him winning the Hodge was just. I think there was a lot of great guys that could have done it, like Nolf and Aymar and Rutherford. They're all exciting to watch. But I think last year, Alex Dieringer was the most exciting college wrestler to watch.
All right, Doug, you want to chime in?
Kyle Snyder for both of them.
Okay.
That was probably the best heavyweight championship match I've ever seen.
All right, so Doug's got Kyle Snyder in both. I'm actually going with Bo Nickel for the college side from Penn State. I love that he throws it out there, has a lot of funk. And then I'm actually going with a guy that I'm probably going to have Jason correct me on the pronunciation, but Yazdani Charati from Iran. Am I close?
Nailed it.
Did I get it? Okay, I think at 163 there, him winning. That was just, I loved his style, and he actually looked like Gable out there, and I love that guy. So I hope you had as much fun watching him live as I did on NBC's broadcast, Jason.
Yeah. Hassan Yazdani Charati he's a special type of wrestler, that's for sure.
All right, next category, most innovative It doesn't necessarily have to be a wrestler. It could be a coach. It could be someone in the sport. I will leave you with that most innovative person in the sport of wrestling, Jason.
Most innovative in the sport of wrestling. You know what? That's a really good question. Doug, do you have an answer on this one? Because you might have to come back to me on this.
Because I have one. I can go if you want to think about it.
Okay, you go and
see what we're looking for.
Okay, Brian Smith, I think with what he's doing and just trying things with being on the stage and then going to the student union and setting up the mat there, I just like that he's thinking different about the sport, and not only thinking different, but he's implementing those thoughts that he has to make the sport better. And I think what he does to make wrestling a better product is what we need to emulate as wrestling fans.
I like that. So that's jug the memory properly, because what was the biggest single wrestling event outside of Madison Square Garden last year? Or was this the thing is that's the season. That technically was in 15. So can the Grapple at the Gridiron count?
You can count it since it was in the last season.
Here, and how about this? I got to give the University of Iowa and their sports information office and their athletic administration and the Coralville, Iowa City, CVB, Josh Schamberger, Chris Brewer, Tom and Terry Brand, Luke Eustace at the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. Everything that happened in Iowa City, to me, seemed innovative last year. They hosted the Big Tens, the Olympic trials, and grappled the gridiron in the
That's
same
an
year.
Excellent choice. Excellent choice.
That, to me...
They're going to have the World Cup this year.
They're
going to have the World Cup this year. So well, it's really... They're on top of that. That's a good choice. I'll go with you on that one.
All right, so Doug... Doug's mimicking you on that, so we have a couple choices there. I think that's good because... Really, they did they did something special there. And then I'll say this with that choice there is that a lot of programs got behind that, whether it was Rutgers, whether it was Upper Iowa. They took that concept and they went with it. So that really did set a trend, and we saw the result of that. So that
Cohen Simpson.
Yeah. They did it too. Cohen Simpson, yeah.
An outdoor duel is not a new concept, but putting it at a football stadium. And then, as you're right, you're seeing, Rutgers at Yankee Stadium, and then the battle at the birthplace, and then we've seen them taking the football fields versus, like I know Grand Canyon, when they still had a program, took their wrestle-offs to the quad. As you said, Brian Smith, put it in the student union. But I think with Iowa doing everything in 1 year, that just says, oh, well, we've got one. We don't need this. We've got one we got to focus on. They said, screw this. We're taking them all.
All right, this is the final category that we have. I think really you're the only one that can answer this. But the best wrestling event of 2016, because you had the Olympic trials, you had the Olympic Games, you had the NCAA tournament, Big Tens. You saw them all. What was the best of that group?
See, the best that I attended, the thing is you've got to have different, I think there's different scenarios or factors in play, variables. I think Madison Square Garden in New York City, the National Championships was a great event. I've been to 14, 15 NCAA championships. So, there's things that set that apart that were great, as I alluded to earlier. But the fact is, the Olympic Games may not have been the super best event in terms of how it was run, but it was still the Olympics. Now, then we go to the Olympic trials. And in this country, having them in back-to-back cycles in Iowa City, it's a special moment for our Olympians. So I think that those three will stand out as the three most important events, at least from an American standpoint. And two, I had the opportunity to be on the microphone for all three. So this year for me was like a crazy, super exciting year anyway. I would probably go the Olympic trials in Iowa City. And I'm not just saying because I'm on an Iowa radio show right now, but that event to me, because the way it was run, the important and how close I am to the athletes, and it's like I know a ton of the athletes in Iowa City, and I know a ton of the athletes at the NCAAs. I only know a quarter of the not even a tenth of the athletes at the Olympics. But the fact is the concentration of the talent and the dreams realized to just make a team in Iowa City, make the Olympic trials such a unique and viable and important event to the athletes that yes. You want to win an NCAA title, but look at a weight class like 65 kilos. How many NCAA champions were in that weight meeting in the first round?
Yeah, amazing.
So I would say the Olympic trials is probably my event of the year.
All right, Jason Bryant of MattTalkOnline.com is on the program with us. We are doing a season in review. One of the things that happened that was not a positive was that Jay Robinson got let go at the University of Minnesota, and now Minnesota has to move forward without his leadership. As we look back on all that, we get a few moments to reflect on what happened there. How are we going to view Jay Robinson's legacy now that it's over?
Well, what's thrown a monkey wrench into that is basically what happened to Jay Rob's kind of been swept under the rug in terms of the media up here in Minnesota, because there's a football issue with players being suspended and some things that are saying, okay, well, you know what, people really stop talking about J-Rob up here, because now the focus is on what's this new AD going to do with this football program and players being suspended and potential boycotts. And unfortunately, well, it's two ways to look at it. Unfortunately, Jay's being swept under the rug. But on the positive side, Jay's being swept under the rug because it realizes that Jay became more of a pawn in what looks like this situation with the leadership at the University of Minnesota and the administration within the department. And, you know, you can go back to the Clem Haskins scandal with basketball and Richard Pitino having issues. So there are more moving parts to the Jay Robinson issue than Jay trying to do right by his athletes and dealing with, an alleged cover-up of some drug issues. I think Jay Robinson will, I think it's temporarily tarnished his image. But you know what? Kyle, you and I have both took the opportunity to change our lives and careers to go work for Jay Robinson. Why? Because we believe in what the guy sells. And granted, our efforts at 411 didn't quite go the way you and I wanted them to. But the fact is, if it was anybody but Jay Robinson, would you have left Iowa? Would I have left Pennsylvania for this to happen? Probably not. So, I mean, we go back on our past history in 2008, 2009, and yeah, things didn't end well there for you, I, and Jay. But guess what? Jay Robinson still supported us. It wasn't a bad taste in our mouths. And Jay is the type of person who's a straight shooter. He's going to raise you like you're his own kids. He's going to, treat you, his wrestlers, like he would his own kids. So the fact that Jay got fired over this or relieved of his duties, I think was the bigger issues are with the University of Minnesota. And I think people are going to realize with all this other stuff coming out with the football program that, Jay, what happened to you really, really sucked. And sometimes you got to fall on the sword for what you believe in. And I think Jay's legacy in the wrestling community, I don't think is going to be tarnished by this at all. I think a lot of people have already moved on from it. And, it's strange to not see Jay on the bench, when we go to Williams or we go to the sports pavilion. But, this day was going to come one way or the other, whether he retired on his own volition or if he got fired. There's going to be a Gophers without Jay one of these years. But, the way it happened really stinks, but I think Jay's going to eventually come out ahead of this situation.
On the Mat with Jason Bryant of MatTalkOnline.com. If you want to listen to On the Mat at any point, go to MatTalkOnline.com and listen to the podcast that Jason graciously has on the Mat Talk Online podcast network. We have about 4 minutes to go and just want to leave this open-ended to you. Any other stories that stick out to you? I know that the Daniel Dennis story was great, that he came back and wrestled Tony Ramos in the finals of the Olympic trials. Some controversy there with comments made by Tony Ramos. But anything big picture that you see that really stuck out to you for the 2016 season?
I think we covered a lot of them. And one of the things that when you ask a question like that, off the top of your head, there's always something, yeah. And then when we get done, you're like, I wish I would have said this. There's so many things. Like we've got the Division III championships came back to Cedar Rapids, and we saw, Wartburg reclaim it, and we saw Grandview set a record for team points. Like, let's look at the NAI just for a moment. When that team scored title, that record for points was set by St. Cloud State, or actually it was set by Dana College, coached by Steve Costanza, who's now at St. Cloud State. They did it with an extra round and a half of points. And then when Grandview tied it a couple years ago, it was like, wow, we didn't have a round and a half to score points on. That was phenomenal. Last year, with the Andrew Long situation that happened, they didn't even have him, and they blew past the record, scoring over 200 points. I think that was a notable story because the NAIA is one of these things that, Des Moines got a championship team, and it's called the Grandview Vikings. So it, often overlooked by the rest of the community because it is not Division I. I think that was a tremendous story. I think St. Cloud repeating in Division II is a tremendous story. We know how good Wartburg is. I think any national championship team was a tremendous story. The fact that we've got women's wrestling, we're over 30 colleges now. I think the next big story of whatever insert year here will be when the first Division I school says, all right, we're starting a women's wrestling program. But when we look at it, Jordan Burroughs not placing, huge deal. Yeah. Adeline Gray not medaling after 3 world championships. Those are big stories, and they're not big stories for the right reasons in terms of success. We're going to see those athletes come back and make great stories for 2017 and 2018 out of the shortcomings for 2016. So there's just there's so many things that happened this year.
And the Grandview one is really worth mentioning again, because not only is Andrew Long out of the lineup, but you're talking about the best wrestler in NAIA, period. Here's a guy that won the Midlands, won the Dan Gable Wrestler of the Midlands tournament in 2015. But he was that good, and he did not make it to the lineup, and they still set the record. That shows you the depth they have.
Yeah, we've gone this whole show without even mentioning Jaden Cox, who came off the college mat, down a weight, wasn't really super versed in senior free, had to get a passport just to qualify the weight class to win the bronze medal. Jaden Cox is a tremendous story, and the talents that guy possesses, and his ability to play 15,000 different instruments. That
amazing.
Guy is a great guy to pin our as a role model for wrestlers. We also need to put that guy on a pedestal as well.
That's right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us for a couple segments here and doing a season review. We appreciate it, and always love getting my Matt Talk Online news in my inbox, so can't speak highly about that enough, because it is worth having and signing up for. And appreciate you spending a couple segments with us, Jason.
My pleasure. Remember Scott, Kyle, and Doug. Hail Caesar!
Exactly. We will the next time we see you at a wrestling meet. Thanks for joining us.
Yoga pants forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, let's not go there.
Hey, we've had a lot of fun, and we will catch up with everyone in 2017. For Jason Bryant, Doug Van Gelder, I'm Kyle Klingman.
You've been listening to On the Mat, the Cedar Valley's longest-running radio show devoted entirely to wrestling. Brought to you by Rolling Ford and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum on 1650 The Fan.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.